Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Shoot the People is a documentary capturing photographer and activist Misan Harriman's journey, documenting global protest movements that drive social change. Following Harriman as he highlights the resilience of grassroots activists fighting for equality, civil rights, and social justice, the film showcases the intersectionality of these movements and their collective power. With an historical context, interviews with activists, and exploration of digital activism, the documentary reveals how Harriman's lens brings the world's activism to light, inspiring viewers to recognize their own power in shaping more than just society. We're joined today by the director of Shoot the People, and that would be Andy Mundy-Castle. Andy, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thank you very much for having me.
There's so much about this film that is compelling. Obviously, Misan Harriman is a remarkable photographer and human being, and obviously someone who cares deeply about the human condition. What put you onto this particular project?
I mean, it's exactly as you've those values and those traits that you've identified. I think during the summer of 2020, when George Floyd was lynched in front of all of us as we were sort of stuck in our homes behind closed doors during lockdown, trying to be insular with our own families and isolate ourselves, here we all, in public view, had sight of something that was probably one of the most horrendous acts of the last 50 years. And Misan's voice grew louder and louder during that time. He was somebody out there who was just pointing his camera and representing his images online. And I caught wind of that. We had a mutual friend who'd said, hey, by the way, Misan's keen on making a documentary. He'd been planning his own thing anyway. And the first conversation we had, he'd said he'd just seen my BAFTA winning speech for a film that I'd made called White Nanny Black Child. He fell in love with that film and really sort of felt like he met a kindred spirit. And we set about on a journey of trying to navigate this complex story of his, someone who was learning how to become an activist, a father, a human being, and also deal with the daily challenges of what it meant to be at the brunt end of indiscriminate injustice, really.
So you started filming him from that point forward. We see this in the film, kind of his travels around the world, watching him interact with a remarkable array of people. In terms of Misan Harriman and his work, how he presents himself and his work to the world.
So Misan presents himself. I suppose he chooses to use monochrome images, shoots on Leica cameras, and reportage, very cinematic in his approach. But he's an image maker of humanity and empathy, and looks for the kind of light and dark in the shadows, and really represents people as he sees them and meets them. People are often surprised at how long a shoot with Misan takes, because we're talking of minutes, not a sort of curated hour long, loads of crew. It's literally him, his camera, and a backpack. If you see him now, he's probably wearing his backpack with his 3 cameras on him. I often wander around with him and say, are you all right? Because this backpack is bloody heavy. So I say all of this because obviously I was dealing with a man who was deep in his artistry, as in wanting to really kind of engage and learn everything about that chosen art form that he's working with. So for me, it was quite easy to say, I'm going to use this vacuum of archive that he presents us to help the story and to help navigate the story and to help tell the array of things that he chooses to document. The film really intertwines between three lanes. It's a portrait on Misan, the story that his images are capturing, and the kind of protests that he followed. But also there's an archival story that talks about the history of protest or the history of activism. And, I was very mindful that it would have felt quite disingenuous for Misan to hold this whole story alone, basically. And I wanted these other voices, these archival voices, to help the journey he's going through. Because, if we're talking about the moment that he came to prominence, that's only 5 years ago, whereas he is doing work and he's along a journey that many people have tread before, and we're all on a journey. The activism that we're seeing today is nothing new. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's really what the archival story is trying to say, is that don't feel alone in this journey, don't feel alone in this mission. We are continuing a cycle that has gone before us, and whilst change might not feel like it's immediate, whenever change has happened, protest has been at the heart of it somewhere. So, and actually, that's to paraphrase Kumi Naidu, who is one of the voices in the film as well.
Yes.
And so it was really important to have some heavyweight voices, people who have really studied activism and studied social change and social movement, because Misan alone couldn't do that, and it would have
Yeah.
been unfair to place that all on his shoulders.
A lot of attention is paid to the apartheid regime in South Africa. And by virtue of my introduction into the world of photography and how that relates to that, I was fortunate enough to have Raoul Peck on to talk about Ernest Cole last
Yeah.
year. And so that was those images were, I'll say, familiar to me, but but there is something about photography. There's something about capturing a moment
Mhm.
that crystallizes so much. And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the science of it, but I know the emotion of it. And you
Mm.
see it in his work because really it's very powerful, the photographs that we see in the film.
Yeah, I think the monochrome has something to do with that as
Yeah.
well. I feel that there's a certain depth that comes out. Black and white, I think, immediately makes the mind feel nostalgic. So it makes it feel like it's of a time gone by, but actually it's happening in real time. And I think you kind of get to just focus on the gaze and
Yeah.
the subject in front of you, or the message that's in front of you. And color often just brings a whole array of thinking to that, right? But I feel that really Misan's camera is an extension of him. I
Yeah.
think he's looking for the shared humanity in faces, expressions, smiles, the slight gaze that he may get. And, I think that's partly to do with his neurodiversity. He's very much in tune with that, a level of sort of empathy that I found it rare to find in so many other people. I think that he displays a level of compassion that is kind of quite all consuming. I've spoken to his wife on numerous occasions, actually, and interviewed her as part of the film. Some of it made it, and some of it didn't. But it was, she's like that, living with him. This is literally that's what her life is like. There's a constant worry about what's happening in the world, and I think that his camera is really an extension of all the things that are going on in his mind. There is a quote that he uses that I believe is from someone that inspired him, and that name escapes me now, but the statement is what holds true, is that the eyes should learn to listen before the ears do. I think that says something, that speaks volumes towards the kind of work and the images that he puts out into the world.
Just to kind of give a little background on him, Misan Harriman, and I want to first of all I want to let people know we're talking about the film Shoot the People, which I love the title because you can interpret it in different ways. It lifts that title up, watching him work, watching him do what he does and the things that he cares about.
I mean, that title split a lot of opinion, and I fought hard to keep it. For myself, as a man of African heritage, and sort of dealing with navigating a career in the film and television industry, which is notoriously hard to break through in, you face a lot of challenge, a lot of injustice, a lot of unconscious bias, right? I think that really and truly there's a certain fearlessness. There's a certain fearlessness, and there's a certain sort of like, approach to just having the ability to do. The external factors often limit you. Other people's impressions of you limit your ability to just be free with expression. And that is a crime. I often think now, where things are becoming more challenged and homes and broadcast spaces are becoming more aggressive for time and consumption, and sort of the way people read things, is that people who were already marginalized are even more marginalized now. And I think that it's really important to kind of help create voices and help voices find themselves within this myriad of the arts world. Otherwise, we're left with a very sort of myopic view of the future that is told to us by certain cultural lenses, and that's not what art is about. That's not what expression is about. I'm on Bowery right now in the middle of New York, where those great pop artists, some may say not great, but the pop artists that define the Andy Warhol, the William T. Williams, the Basquiat, they all grew up within a mile radius here at a time when America was trying to reinvigorate and reinvent the way it was presenting itself to the world. And that diversity of thought, that diversity of expression is the lifeblood of what we should all aspire towards encouraging.
I couldn't agree more. I think we're at a particularly fraught time in human history with the technologies that are being introduced into our lives that could, in fact, dehumanize us all in some very significant ways, or it could enrich us all. But this human connection, and I don't know if it's just me, but I really feel over the last year or so, there's been a real yearning for people to reconnect on whatever level, but it just feels like existentially important to me to get out, to see people, to meet with people, to meet them where they live. And I do feel that. This is not something I'm just saying for the sake of our conversation. I really feel it's critically important in watching this film, watching Shoot the People. It
Mm.
reinforces that notion more than.
Yeah, and back to that idea of the title is that obviously to cap on what I was saying, I personally, just on a microcosm, have felt I've been at the brunt end of injustice that I can't control, right? And I think that this idea of shooting people is double-handed, right? We see it, we feel it. You kind of know when something is just not right. No matter if you have,
Yeah.
that good conscience within inside of you, and most of us do. We're all born with some level of compassion, right? I truly, truly believe that. I don't think people are born evil. I think they are made evil. And to your point, right now we have a swing in a direction of people holding on to that last. In what world can we fathom talking about someone becoming the world's first quadrillionaire?
Right.
And yet you can walk on any street in this country, and you can see real kind of, within a block, within a couple of miles, you can see opulence, but you can also see complete devastation in human pride. And I think that we really have to kind of go into inside. People have to start becoming a lot more internal, and sort of interrogating what matters. How do I create the art that I consume? How do I create the books that I read? How do I create the messages that I share? And I feel that you're right, really, Mike. I think the swing and the pushback, people will get bored of the rhetoric of, oh, it's those guys in the Middle East effing everything up, or
Right.
it's those guys down in the ghetto that are really kind
Yeah.
of gonna rape your children or rob the place. Well, no, it isn't. It really isn't. There are people that have exactly the same dreams as you. They have the same ambitions. Of course, there is good and evil in everybody and every community within our society. But the large body of people want the same thing. They want to just live
Yep.
a peaceful life with the right to have some dignity and a shared sense of humanity. And I think at the core of this film, that is what the message is. It's that there is a world in which we can inhabit together, and we can live a shared sense of humanity, and that someone having a minuscule amount of what you have does not change your life chances in any way, shape, or form. I know, like many, and uh, I get to the place where I just think, God, what is this all for? I from when I was a young boy, I'd always dreamed of making films. I'm fortunate enough to call this a career. But I worry for the young child like me who's trying to get into this industry that is so heavily controlled by so many forces, so many external forces. And I'm inspired by Gen Z because I think they're using different mediums to communicate, and we're seeing that pushback.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and to your point, and again, coming back to the point of the film, Shoot the People, and that is from whether it's about Gaza, George Floyd, we see Martin Luther King, we meet Martin Luther King's son, and what a moving conversation you had with him, what's going on around the world right now, the spirit of Mr. Harriman bleeds out of every frame of this film. And what I found very compelling is when he would walk into a crowd of demonstrators, or the police are walking towards him, and he's talking to them. His bearing, the way he carries himself, the way he talks to people, a genteel person, someone who is there not as a threat, but simply as someone who is about what he is about, which is documenting humanity and all of its failures and triumphs. And yeah, I mean, he's such a moving person. I really don't want to lose sight of the fact that spending time with him is reward enough to watch this film. Just spending time around him, hearing his conversations with others, what he cares about, what influenced him, what brought him to this point in his life it's just a gift. He really is pretty remarkable on many, many different levels. So
He is,
I
yeah.
celebrate the idea that I got a chance to spend some time with. I really feel like I spent time with him after
That,
watching
that's
this
a
film.
that's a beautiful way of encapsulating it, really. I think that I was fortunate enough to actually obviously be on the other side of the lens and call him a dear, dear friend today. I think that for me it's a duty of care when someone allows you into their world like that, especially when they allow you into their home, their family, and say, "Yep, do what you will." And share my story. For me, I take that no matter who it is that's at the end of the lens. I take that very, very seriously when someone opens their doors, because I personally wouldn't do it. For the longest time, looked internal and said, "About time you told your own story." But even that is really challenging. It's really challenging to say, "Okay, warts and all, here I am. Portray me to the world." But I think with him, it was sort of he is such a complex character, but you've hit on something, and that's his cadence and his gentileness, nature. He has a way of disarming you, but naturally, not in a sort of conniving way. It is definitely an opportunity to spend an hour and a half with one of the greatest thought leaders of activism of our time, I would say. Especially in the digital sphere, many people kind of can question, am I doing enough? Who am I as an activist? What do I need to do? But I think if you spend time with Misan, be it through his social network, be it through this film, be it through the articles that he writes or the podcast that he's on, I think what it helps you do is it just ignites a different portal of thinking in another way, whether that is agreeable with you or not. I think, we can't lose that essence of debate and space for thinking in another way.
Through his work, you can see that the fire burns bright in him for what he's committed to, what he's choosing to shoot in these photographs, that his the continence of him belies this kind of drive that he has to shine a light on the things that are important to him and to bring them out. And by the way, you mentioned the film The After, which was nominated for an Academy Award in
Mhm.
2023. So as you're talking about filmmaker to filmmaker here,
Yeah.
the two of you, that must have been pretty remarkable just to be able to share that sort of that bond over your passion.
Absolutely. And I think the great thing is that I have studied the art of documentary. I've since the age of 15, I've been very fortunate to know this non-fiction genre is the lane that I choose, to the point where my company is called Doc Hearts. Whilst I have ambitions to make narrative scripted films, I will never stray too far from real stories, stories that actually are stranger than fiction, as they say. And so I think Misan had a mutual respect for the fact that this is something that he knows that I've been learning this, and I'm really sort of a student of this particular genre. And I think he was in respect of that, really, and just said, "Look, I trust you, and I trust your choices." And there's something also about the cohesion of the cinematography through the wonderful DOP Johan Perry, who of late has shot a lot more scripted and drama work. But there was something that, for me, needed to hold the cohesion of this story through one sort of cinematographic lens, really, because when you're making a documentary like this, which spans countries, it's easy to sort of try and find local tech professionals to help you in each region. But that was a very deliberate choice to keep the same visual aesthetic, to raise that feeling of kind of the world around Misan, which tells just as much of a story as he does, right? That was really important. So there was a lot of collaborators. I think that's the thing, is like from Johan to Mavo Boyle, the editor, to Nick Amar, the composer who created such a wonderful score that kept everything together. Misan knew he was surrounded by people that were at a certain place in our journeys that would only allow for collaboration and real respect, and he brought himself to that too.
Well, I hope and trust that he is well. He and his wife, his lovely wife,
Mm,
are doing well and will continue to do what he's been doing so effectively for so long.
mm,
And just really, yeah, what can I say? We're an honor to get to know him. And I'll be honest, I was not familiar with his name. I've seen some of the work that I saw in the film, but I can't say that I knew it was him. So, for people who are a lot of people maybe like me who now can put a name to something that moved them, something
mm,
powerful in a photograph that moved them, and to be able to put that person in that place and understand this is what they're about. This is not just something that they stumbled upon. This is a lifetime of commitment that they have been a part of. And yeah, and to you for bringing that to my attention, and hopefully millions of other people will be able to see this as well. So
What I will say to that point, and thank you for sharing that, and it does mean a lot. I think whenever the work connects with anybody, and it feels like it has connected with you, I think that we as a community of cinephiles, of people that are into movie making, that are into this art form of communicating through 24 frames on screen, I feel that we are at such a kind of a precipice in our industry where you have to make a choice as to how do you show up for independent cinema? How do you show up for independent voices? Because the challenge is greater than it ever has been, and we're going to lose out on so many creative voices because the gates and the barriers are so high, because the homes are so few, and the gatekeepers are so loud that when you see independent films, when you hear of people who are making a transition, and if they speak to you in any way, shape, or form, how we show up, how we get out, there has to be, I think that pushback that you were talking about in this wider political climate has to also transition itself into the arts, and especially into our chosen medium of film. So companies like Watermelon Pictures who are distributing this, independent producers like us, Misan is also an independent filmmaker himself. When you hear and see of the underdog or the people that are trying to exist outside of the mainstream, and as challenging as it is, because we all know how easy it is to just flick onto a major streamer, to just flick onto a major broadcaster and get the kind of content that you want, but it really is important to feed the cornerstone of the industry that created the joys that we have seen over the decades, but will soon eradicate if we allow franchises to take over, if we allow just a
I
handful
agree.
of voices. If you think about the network that exists under big conglomerate companies, voices like mine will be harder to find their way through, and I think
Yeah.
it really needs a conscious effort of people who are part of this community that has existed for so long, to kind
Yeah.
of just keep that fight alive, because I was saying that one of the worst forms of censorship is the artist who doesn't even think his idea is worth leaving his mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're self-censoring,
Yeah.
you've got something that you really want to say. Before you've taken it out of the door, you've already spoken yourself out of it. You haven't
Yeah.
taken it to test it with friends, to test it with family, to test it on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You've been like, that's a great idea, but shit, no one's going to want that. And no one's going to want that because the industry has told you you ain't worth shit. But actually, that little voice is the one that has to find its way
Yeah.
through. The one that
That's
started the fire is the one that has to burn the house down.
well, I couldn't agree more. Thank you. You've been very, very generous with your time, Andy. Andy Mundy-Castle, the director of this remarkable documentary called Shoot the People. Before you can go to shootthepeoplefilm.com, shootthepeoplefilm.com. And it has been an honor to get to know you and also to spend time with this amazing person and photographer, Misan Harriman. And thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much for your time.
so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Mike.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.